The Debt Collector's Dilemma. Marcus Chen adjusted his worn leather jacket as he stepped off the transport shuttle onto the dusty surface of Kepler 442b. The planet's twin suns cast harsh shadows across the ramshackle settlement that barely qualified as a spaceport. This was his least favorite kind of assignment. Debt collection on the outer rim worlds where desperation hung in the air like smoke. The holographic display on his wrist showed the target location. Sector 7, Dwelling 23B. The debtor was listed as Zarathek Neymar, a Sildari widow whose late husband had borrowed heavily from the consortium to fund medical treatments for their daughter. The treatments had failed to save him, leaving behind mounting debts that now exceeded the value of their small homestead by a factor of 10. Marcus had done this job for 8 years, ever since his discharge from the Colonial Marines. He was good at it because he understood desperation, having lived through his own fair share. The key was to remain detached, professional. Get in, assess the assets, arrange the transfer, and move on to the next case. Clean and simple. The settlement's main thoroughfare was little more than a dirt road lined with prefabricated shelters and converted shipping containers. Alien species from a dozen different worlds had ended up here, drawn by promises of work in the asteroid mines or agricultural collectives. Most found only poverty and broken dreams. As he walked, Marcus noticed how the other residents avoided making eye contact. Word traveled fast in places like this. They knew why humans like him visited the outer settlements. The consortium's reputation preceded them, and it wasn't a kind one. Dwelling 23B turned out to be a small, dome-shaped structure made from recycled hull plating. Solar collectors lined the roof, and a small garden patch struggled to grow native vegetables in the harsh soil. It looked like someone was trying very hard to make a home out of very little. Marcus checked his scanner one more time. The debt amount flashed red, 847,000 credits. The estimated value of all assets on the property, 12,000 credits. The math was brutal and clear. This family would lose everything, and it still wouldn't come close to covering what they owed. He approached the entrance and pressed the door chime. The sound that emerged was broken, crackling with static. After a moment, the door slid open with a grinding noise that suggested the mechanism was failing. The being who answered was clearly Sildari, tall and slender with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold depths of sadness. Her clothing was neat but worn, patched in several places with care and precision. This was Zarathek Neymar. "You are from the consortium," she said in heavily accented standard. It wasn't a question. "Marcus Chen, Asset Recovery Division." "Ma'am, I'm here regarding the outstanding debt of 847,000 credits registered under your late husband's name. May I come in?" For a moment, something flickered across her face. Fear, resignation, perhaps a flash of anger. Then she stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. The interior of the dwelling was small but meticulously organized. Everything had its place, and despite the obvious poverty, everything was clean. The walls were decorated with what appeared to be hand-drawn pictures, childish crayon drawings of families and spaceships and distant planets. "Tea?" Zarathek asked, moving toward a small kitchen area. Marcus was about to decline. He preferred to keep these interactions brief, when he heard a sound from the back room. A soft cough, followed by labored breathing. "Your daughter," he said. Zarathek's hands stilled on the tea preparation. "Kira-shan, she is not well. The same condition that took her father. The medical debt. That's what this is about. We tried everything, spent everything, borrowed everything. The doctors on the core worlds, they said they could help. They said..." Her voice trailed off. "They took our money. They could not take the sickness." Marcus pulled out his assessment tablet and began the standard evaluation. The furniture was basic but functional, maybe 800 credits total. The food synthesizer was an older model, perhaps 2,000 credits if he was generous. The solar array outside might fetch 3,000. The dwelling itself was worth almost nothing. The land lease would expire in 6 months anyway. As he worked, he became aware of being watched. A small face peered around the corner from the back room. A child with her mother's pale blue skin but brighter eyes. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old in human terms. "Mama, who is the human?" the child asked in her own language. Zarathek responded quickly, but Marcus's universal translator caught the gist. "A visitor, little star. Go back to bed." But Kira-shan was curious about the strange human in their home. She approached slowly, still keeping her mother between them. Marcus noticed how thin she was, how carefully she moved. The illness was clearly progressing. "What is that?" she asked, pointing at his assessment tablet. "It's a computer. I use it for work." Her eyes widened with interest. "Can it play games?" Marcus glanced at Zarathek, who looked mortified. "Kira-shan, do not bother the gentleman. He has business to attend to." But something in the child's eagerness reminded Marcus of his younger sister, lost in the war years ago. Almost without thinking, he activated the tablet's entertainment mode and showed Kira-shan a simple puzzle game. For the next few minutes, he found himself explaining how the game worked while Zarathek completed the tea preparation. The child was bright, picking up the rules quickly and laughing with delight when she solved a particularly challenging level. "She learns fast," Marcus observed. "Like her father. He was engineer before the sickness. Very smart man." Zarathek's voice carried a weight of loss. "He designed improvements for the mining equipment, made operations 30% more efficient. They promised him partnership, profit sharing. Instead, when he became sick, they terminated his contract." Marcus had heard similar stories 100 times. The frontier was full of people who had been used up and discarded by the same corporations that now sent him to collect their debts. It was just business, he reminded himself, nothing personal. But as Kira-shan showed him more of her drawings, pictures of her family before her father died, dreams of distant worlds and better times, Marcus found his professional detachment beginning to crack. The standard procedure was clear. He would complete his assessment, file his report, and within 72 hours, a consortium team would arrive to seize all assets and arrange for the sale of the debtors into indentured servitude. It was legal under frontier law, and it happened every day across the outer worlds. Zarathek served the tea in cups that had been carefully repaired multiple times. The liquid was bitter but warming, made from some local plant. As they sat in the small living area, Marcus explained the situation in the clinical terms required by consortium policy. The total debt, including accumulated interest and collection fees, now stands at 847,000 credits. The assessed value of your assets is insufficient to cover this amount. Under Section 12 of the Frontier Commerce Code, you and your dependents will be transferred to consortium custody for debt resolution through contracted labor. He had delivered this speech hundreds of times. The words came automatically, but for the first time in years, they felt like ash in his mouth. Zarathek listened without expression, but her hands trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. Kira-shan, not understanding the full implications, but sensing the tension, moved closer to her mother. "How long?" Zarathek asked. "The standard contract is 15 years, with possible early release based on productivity metrics and good behavior." "And Kira-shan?" This was always the hardest part. "Dependents under the age of majority are typically placed in consortium educational facilities until they can be assigned to appropriate work details." What he didn't say, what the policy manuals glossed over, was that families were almost never reunited once the separation occurred. The consortium's educational facilities were little more than training camps designed to produce compliant workers. Children went in with names and dreams and came out with identification numbers and skill sets. Marcus looked at the drawings on the wall again. In one of them, a small blue figure held hands with two larger ones under a bright yellow sun. The word family was written underneath in a child's careful handwriting. 15 years. By the time Zarathek completed her contract, Kira-shan would be a grown woman who might not even remember her mother's face, and given the girl's illness, there was no guarantee she would survive the separation and the harsh conditions of a consortium facility. Marcus finished his tea and stood up, his assessment complete. The numbers were what they were. The law was what it was. His job was to implement policy, not to question it. But as he prepared to leave, Kira-shan tugged at his jacket. "Will you come back to visit?" she asked with the innocent hope that only children possessed. Marcus looked down at her bright eyes, then at her mother's carefully controlled expression of despair. For 8 years, he had walked away from scenes like this without looking back. It was the only way to do the job without going insane. Tonight, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, walking away seemed like the hardest thing in the universe. "I have to go," he said finally. "My ship leaves early tomorrow." As he stepped out into the cooling evening air of Kepler 442b, Marcus told himself this was just another case. Just another day's work in the endless machinery of debt and survival that ground up families like grain. But the taste of bitter tea lingered in his mouth, and he couldn't shake the image of a small blue hand holding his tablet, eagerly learning to play a simple game while her world crumbled around her. Tomorrow, he would file his report and move on to the next assignment. Tonight, he had a decision to make that would change everything. The choice that changed everything. Marcus sat in his rented quarters at the settlement's only boarding house, staring at the assessment report on his tablet. The cursor blinked steadily next to the submit button, waiting for him to transmit the data that would seal the fate of Zarathek and Kira-shan. He had completed hundreds of these reports over the years. The process was automatic. Assess, document, submit, move on. But tonight, his finger hesitated over the control. Through the thin walls of the boarding house, he could hear the sounds of the frontier settlement winding down for the evening. Somewhere in the distance, a cargo hauler's engines rumbled as it prepared for departure. Tomorrow, he was scheduled to be on a transport to the next system, the next case, the next family whose lives would be reduced to numbers in a ledger. Marcus pulled up the case files from his previous assignments. Yannick Beitar, a Rigellan farmer whose crops failed due to drought. Sold into 15 years of mining labor on Titan Station. His wife and 3 children disappeared into the consortium's educational system. Helena Vasquez, a human colonist whose medical bills bankrupted her after a shuttle accident, currently serving year 4 of her contract in the helium processing plants of Europa. Her son aged out of the educational facility and was assigned to a deep space freight operation. They hadn't seen each other in 3 years. The list went on. Dozens of families, hundreds of individual lives, all processed through the same efficient system. Marcus had always told himself he was just doing his job. Someone had to enforce the contracts. Someone had to maintain order in the chaos of the frontier. If he didn't do it, someone else would. But tonight, that rationalization felt hollow. He closed the files and walked to the small window overlooking the settlement. In the distance, he could see the soft glow from the solar collectors on Dwelling 23B. Inside that small dome, a mother was probably putting her sick daughter to bed, telling her stories about better times, trying to maintain hope in the face of impossible circumstances. Marcus's comm unit chimed with an incoming message from his supervisor at the consortium. "Chen, needs status update on Kepler 442b assignment. Home Office wants confirmation on asset recovery timeline. High priority case due to amount owed. Respond within 24 hours. Director Walsh. High priority. That meant they were paying extra attention to this one. The debt amount was significant enough to warrant scrutiny from the regional directors. There would be no flexibility, no room for creative interpretation of policy. Marcus set down the comm unit and made a decision that surprised him with its clarity. He couldn't submit the report, not tonight, maybe not ever. Instead, he found himself walking back through the settlement toward Dwelling 23B. The evening air was cool, and the twin moons cast strange shadows across the dusty paths. A few other residents were out, sitting on makeshift porches or tending to small gardens. They watched him pass with wary eyes. When he reached the dwelling, Marcus hesitated at the door. What was he planning to say? What could he possibly offer that would change the mathematics of debt and desperation? The door slid open before he could press the chime. Zarathek stood there, as if she had been expecting him. "You came back," she said simply. "We need to talk." She led him inside, where Kirashan was indeed in bed but clearly not sleeping. The child's large eyes peered out from under a blanket that had been sewn together from various fabric scraps, each patch carefully chosen and lovingly attached. "Mama, is the human staying for dinner?" Kirashan asked hopefully. Marcus looked at the modest food preparation area. There wasn't enough for an extra person, and he knew it. These people were stretching every resource to survive. "I can't eat your food," he said, "but maybe we can talk about other things." For the next hour, Marcus found himself in a conversation unlike any he'd had in years. Zarathek told him about her late husband, an engineer named Kalen who had dreamed of developing new mining techniques that would be safer for workers. She showed Marcus some of his old designs, sketched on precious paper with careful precision. He believed technology should serve people, not the other way around, she explained. The mining companies, they were interested only in profit margins. When he became sick, they said his ideas were too expensive to implement. Kirashan, despite her mother's gentle protests, insisted on showing Marcus more of her drawings. One in particular caught his attention, a sketch of spaceships of different designs, drawn with remarkable detail for a child's work. "She wants to be starship engineer like her father," Zarathek said with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Very smart with mathematics and spatial reasoning. Before we lost everything, she was taking advanced placement courses through the Planetary Education Network. What happened to the courses? We could no longer afford access fees. And now..." Zarathek's voice trailed off. They both knew what "now" meant. Marcus studied the child's drawings more carefully. The ship designs weren't just imaginative doodles. They showed real understanding of engineering principles. Kirashan had drawn detailed cross-sections showing power distribution systems and cargo layouts. Where did she learn about starship design? Her father's books, technical manuals. She reads everything she can find. Zarathek managed a sad smile. Sometimes I think she understands the principles better than adults who work on ships. An idea began to form in Marcus's mind. It was completely against protocol, potentially career-ending, and probably illegal under a dozen different statutes. But as he looked at the carefully maintained home, the loving family photographs, the child's brilliant drawings, he realized he didn't care about protocol anymore. "What if there was another way?" he said carefully. Zarathek looked at him with sudden attention. "What do you mean?" "The debt is real. The consortium will come for collection regardless of what I report. But what if you weren't here when they arrived?" "You mean run? With what resources? Where would we go?" Marcus pulled out his personal datapad, not the official consortium tablet, but his own device. He accessed his private accounts, his savings from 8 years of debt collection commissions. "I have credits. Enough for passage off-world and some starting capital. But more than that, I have contacts." people who need skilled workers, and don't ask too many questions about paperwork. Zarathek stared at him as if he had suggested flying to another dimension. Why would you help us? You work for the people we owe money to. It was a fair question, and Marcus wasn't sure he had a good answer. Maybe because I'm tired of being part of a system that destroys families. Maybe because I see something in your daughter that reminds me of possibilities I thought were lost. Or maybe because 8 years of collecting debts has taught me the difference between legal and right. From her bed, Kira-shan had been listening intently, despite her limited understanding of Standard. Now she spoke up in her own language. Zarathek translated. She asks if you would really help us find a new home. Marcus looked at the child's hopeful face and made a decision that would change all their lives. Not just help you find a new home. If you'll let me, I'd like to be part of that home. The words surprised him as much as they did Zarathek. He hadn't planned to say them, but once spoken they felt more true than anything he'd said in years. You understand what you are offering? We are not just refugees. We are fugitives from a debt that will follow us. Association with us makes you criminal as well. The consortium has made criminals of thousands of families whose only crime was getting sick or having bad luck. Maybe it's time someone made criminals of the consortium. Zarathek was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Finally, she spoke. Kira-shan has never known a father figure since her own died. And I have forgotten what it feels like to have someone choose to stand with us rather than against us. Is that a yes? That is a yes to trying. But Marcus Chen, if we do this, there is no going back, for any of us. Marcus looked around the small dwelling one more time. At the carefully repaired furniture, the child's drawings of spaceships and dreams, the woman who had maintained dignity and love in the face of impossible circumstances. Good. Going back was never really an option anyway. He spent the rest of the night helping them pack the few belongings they could carry. Personal items, Kaylin's engineering notes, Kira-shan's drawings, and a few photographs. Everything else would have to be left behind. As dawn approached, Marcus made one final call to a contact he had cultivated over the years, a smuggler named Chen Martinez, who ran a small freight operation in the Vega system. Martinez owed Marcus a favor from a debt case that had been quietly resolved years earlier. I need passage for 3 to Vega Station, Marcus said when Martinez answered the comm. Discreet passage. No passenger manifests. 3? Last I knew, you worked alone. Things change. Will you do it? There was a pause. This is about that debt collection job, isn't it? You're going native on a case. Marcus looked at Zarathek and Kira-shan, who were waiting by the door with their small collection of belongings. The child held a stuffed animal that had clearly been repaired many times, while her mother carried a bag containing all that remained of their former life. Yeah, Marcus said. I guess I am. Your funeral, or maybe your wedding. Hard to tell sometimes. My ship leaves in 3 hours. Docking bay 7. As they walked through the settlement toward the spaceport, Marcus realized he had never filed his report. By now, Director Walsh would be wondering about the delay. Within days, maybe hours, the consortium would dispatch another collector to investigate. But by then, they would be gone. And Marcus Chen, former debt collector, would have become something he never expected to be. The man who chose family over duty, love over law, and hope over the cold mathematics of profit. The family they built among the stars. 2 years had passed since Marcus Chen had walked away from everything he thought he knew about duty and law. Now, standing on the observation deck of Vega Station, he watched as his daughter Kira-shan put the finishing touches on her latest engineering project. She was no longer the sick, frightened child he had met on Kepler 442b. The experimental treatments available in the Vega system had not only halted the progression of her illness, but had begun to reverse it. More importantly, she had thrived in an environment where her brilliant mind was encouraged rather than stifled by poverty. "Papa Marcus, look," she called out, using the title she had given him after their first month together. Her standard had improved dramatically, though she still carried the musical accent of her mother's people. "The microfusion regulator is working perfectly now. The efficiency is 43% better than standard models." Marcus examined the device she had built from salvaged parts and spare components. At 11 years old, Kira-san was already demonstrating engineering capabilities that surpassed many trained adults. Her fusion regulator design would revolutionize small-scale power generation if it ever reached the commercial market. "Your father would be proud," Marcus said, and meant it. Over the years, he had come to know Kalen through the technical notes he had left behind and the stories Zarathek shared. The man had been a visionary, and his daughter had inherited both his brilliance and his desire to use technology for the betterment of others. Zarathek approached from across the workshop they had established in their quarters. She moved with the confidence of someone who had found her place in the universe again. The haunted look of desperation that had marked her face during their last days on Kepler 442b was gone, replaced by the quiet strength of a woman who had rebuilt her life against impossible odds. "The hospital called," she said, settling beside Marcus as they watched their daughter work. "They want to offer me the position as chief medical technician for the pediatric wing." Marcus smiled. Zarathek had trained as a medical technician before her marriage, but her credentials hadn't been recognized on the frontier world where they had lived. Here on Vega Station, her knowledge and gentle manner with children had quickly made her invaluable to the medical staff. "That's wonderful. You deserve the recognition." "We deserve it," she corrected, taking his hand. "None of this would have been possible without your choice to stand with us." The choice. Even now, Marcus marveled at how a single moment of moral clarity had completely transformed his existence. The debt collector who had once reduced families to numbers in a ledger had become a father and husband who understood that the most important mathematics were the simple equations of love and loyalty. Their new life hadn't been easy. The first months had been particularly challenging as they established new identities and found work that wouldn't trigger consortium attention. Marcus had used his knowledge of corporate procedures to help them navigate the complex web of frontier bureaucracy, while Zarathek had slowly rebuilt her medical career. The real breakthrough had come when Kira-san's engineering talents were discovered by Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of Vega Station's research division. Dr. Kim had taken the child under her wing, providing access to advanced educational programs and cutting-edge laboratory facilities. "The University on New Geneva wants to review Kira-san's fusion regulator design," Marcus told Zarathek. "If they accept her technical paper, she could become the youngest person ever admitted to their advanced engineering program. She's only 11. Genius doesn't follow conventional timelines, and she has advantages that most students don't: real-world experience with resource scarcity and practical problem-solving." Kira-san looked up from her work, having caught part of their conversation. "Are we talking about New Geneva University again? I told Dr. Kim I want to finish my basic education here first. Mama needs me to help with the workshop." The workshop was another of their successes. What had started as a small repair service for station equipment had grown into a legitimate engineering consultancy. Marcus handled the business side while Zarathek managed the medical equipment specialization. Kira-san contributed designs that were often more innovative than anything the major corporations produced. "The workshop will be fine," Zarathek assured her daughter. "You should consider the university opportunity. It's what your birth father would have wanted for you." "But what does Papa Marcus want?" Kira-san asked, looking at him with the direct gaze that reminded Marcus of her mother. Marcus considered the question carefully. What did he want for this brilliant child who had become his daughter in every way that mattered? Safety, certainly. Opportunities to develop her incredible mind. But most of all, he wanted her to have the freedom to choose her own path. I want you to know that you have a family who loves you no matter what you decide. If you want to attend university, we'll support you. If you want to stay here and continue learning through practical experience, we'll support that too. The important thing is that you never again have to face the universe alone. Kira-san smiled and returned to her work, but Marcus could see that his words had made an impact. The child who had once faced separation from her mother and a lifetime of indentured servitude now knew she had choices, support, and people who would stand by her, regardless of what challenges lay ahead. That evening, as the three of them shared dinner in their modest but comfortable quarters, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them together. The consortium still searched for them, though with diminishing intensity as time passed. Other cases, other debts, other families claimed the organization's attention. Sometimes Marcus wondered what had happened to the families from his previous cases, the farmers and colonists and dreamers who had been fed into the machinery of debt collection. He had sent anonymous tips to humanitarian organizations when possible, but he knew he couldn't save them all. What he could do was ensure that the three people sitting around this dinner table never again faced that kind of desperate helplessness. I received a message today, Zarathek said during dessert. From the Sildari Cultural Council, they're establishing a scholarship fund for refugee children who show exceptional academic promise. That's wonderful. Are you thinking of applying for Kira-san? Actually, they want us to help administer the program. My experience with the medical field, your understanding of corporate and legal systems, and Kira-san's story as an example of what's possible when gifted children receive proper support. Marcus set down his fork. That would put us in a very public position. The consortium's influence is weaker in the core systems, Zarathek pointed out. And the Cultural Council has resources, connections. They could provide protection as well as purpose. Kira-san looked up from her dessert. Does this mean we could help other families like we used to be? It means we could try, Marcus said, but it would also mean taking risks. People who fight against systems like the consortium sometimes face serious consequences. Good, Kira-san said with the fierce determination that reminded Marcus of both her parents. The consortium hurt our family. If we can stop them from hurting other families, we should do it. Marcus looked at his wife and daughter, for that's what they were now in every way that truly mattered, and saw the same resolve in both their faces. The frightened refugees he had helped escape Kepler 442b had become strong, confident people ready to stand up for others who faced similar challenges. Then we do it together, he said, all three of us. Later that night, after Kira-san had gone to bed with her latest engineering textbook, Marcus and Zarathek sat together on their small balcony overlooking the station's central plaza. Ships came and went through the docking bays below, carrying travelers and cargo and dreams across the vast distances between stars. Do you ever regret it? Zarathek asked softly. Giving up your career, becoming fugitives? Taking responsibility for people you barely knew? Marcus considered the question seriously. He had lost his pension, his corporate benefits, his position in the social hierarchy of frontier law enforcement. He was wanted by the consortium for theft of services and interference with debt collection. His old colleagues probably considered him a traitor, but he had gained something immeasurably more valuable. He had gained a family, a purpose, and the knowledge that when faced with a choice between cruelty and kindness, he had chosen correctly. Never, he said, taking her hand. Not once. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, the same constellations that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. Somewhere among those stars, families were being torn apart by debts and desperation. But also among those stars, people were making choices to stand with each other, to build something better, to prove that love and loyalty could triumph over the cold mathematics of profit. Marcus Chen, former debt collector, looked up at those stars and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help families like his own. Tonight, he was content to sit with the people he loved and know that sometimes the most important rebellions began with a simple decision to become the family that someone needed. In the workshop below, Kira Shan's fusion regulator hummed quietly to itself, a small miracle of engineering that would soon help power homes and schools and medical facilities across a dozen worlds. It was her gift to the universe, clean, efficient energy created by a child who had been shown that her brilliance mattered, that her dreams had value, that she was worth saving. And in the end, Marcus thought, that was what families did. They saved each other over and over again until the saving became so natural it felt like breathing, until it felt like coming home.